It's going to go. All right, I'm going to start with this question. I'm glad I can see you. So I'm going to start with the question we've all been asking for the past 2 years. Please answer it in your head. And here's the question. Are you well? Are you healthy? Okay, now you're answering it in your head. And I'm going to assume that, like most people, when you consider a question like that, or what your answer is to a question like that, what you think of is, well, do I have any illnesses? Do I have a disease? Any injuries, aches, pains, COVID, that kind of thing? And I'm going to assume that what you don't consider, because few people do, is what about your mental health? Or what about your emotional health? Because few people consider that. And to be honest, as a psychologist, that pisses me off. It just annoys me to no end. And full disclosure, I'm an identical twin. And one of the reasons it annoys me is because when you grow up as an identical twin, you become an expert at spotting favoritism. And there is a way in which we favor the body over the mind. We pay so much attention to our physical health. We take so many steps to enhance our physical health. And we do very little for our emotional health. Very little indeed. As a society, we do not pay attention to our mental. We get dental hygiene, we practice. Emotional hygiene, we don't. We get physical checkups once a year or something like that. Has anyone ever gotten an emotional checkup? Good luck finding where to go to get one. There isn't a place. And indeed, our emotional health is the twin of our well-being with our physical health. Our well-being at large is physical and emotional. Half of that is primarily neglected. And I'm reminded of the neglect all the time. Just recently, I'll tell you this quick story. Recently, I was talking about emotions, and this man waved his hand dismissively at me and said, yeah, I don't believe in feelings. That's what he said, I don't believe in feelings. Now, the man who said that was a senior executive at a company. But the interesting thing is, he said it during the first few minutes of a couple's therapy session, with his wife sitting right next to him, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, clearly having feelings. And so I said I did what most psychologists do when you're caught off guard. You just repeat the statement in the form of the question. And so I said, you don't believe in feelings? And he said, well, I know people have them, but they don't matter. I mean, they're not real. They're not real, like unicorns or Sasquatch or something. And so I looked at his wife and I said, did you know your husband doesn't believe in feelings? And she said this, she goes, no, but that explains a lot. And that's what I did. I started laughing. In fact, I laughed so hard that she started laughing. And then she laughed so hard that he didn't start laughing at all. Actually, he looked quite annoyed. And so I said to him, what, you don't believe in laughter either? Then he got really irritated. So I said, you seem angry. He said, I am angry. I said, oh, there's one feeling you believe in. Now, let's look at some of the others and how they might be impacting your marriage. And then he was listening. And the point is, he wasn't a cruel man. Actually, he was a lovely person. He wasn't a cruel man at all. He just didn't believe or understand how we are impacted by our emotions. Because a lot of that impact, I mean, we are conscious of what we feel, but a lot of that impact is unconscious. And we also don't have enough magnitude of attention that we give small, quote unquote, small emotional wounds. And I'm going to give you two examples right now. I'll start with. Here's one, chronic loneliness. All right, chronic loneliness. Chronic loneliness has the same impact on our long-term health and longevity as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. 5 years ago, the American Psychological Association came out with a press release warning the public that loneliness is a bigger health concern than obesity and smoking. Does anyone know that chronic loneliness will actually kill you? No, because cigarettes come with warnings on them, skull and bones, whatever. This will kill you. Don't do it when you're pregnant. Loneliness doesn't. In fact, it's just stigmatized as, ooh, those odd people who are lonely, But it will actually kill you. It'll make you miserable, for sure, but it impacts your health. They did a study with college freshmen, and they found out that when they're just in the health center, when they just arrived, and freshmen who said they were lonely had a much poorer response to a flu vaccine than ones who weren't, except they had been at college for like 5 days. And already their immune system was being impacted by loneliness. We are social animals. When we feel lonely, we feel under assault. We associate it with being ostracized from our tribe, which was a death sentence when we were nomadic people, really until just a few hundred years ago. And so loneliness is a big deal. Now, if you think, well, all right, fine, old people get lonely, I don't care. The problem is you should care, because in study after study across the globe, the loneliest cohort are 18 to 24-year-olds. You're the ones that are impacted. And most of you don't even realize you're lonely, primarily because, well, I live in a dorm, I'm surrounded by people all day. Sometimes it gets a little noisy. Loneliness sounds kind of fun. But the reality is that loneliness is defined purely subjectively. It doesn't matter whether you're surrounded by people all day. It just matters whether you feel seen, whether you feel appreciated, whether you feel connected to the people around you. And you can feel really disconnected, even when you're surrounded by people. A majority of people who are lonely are actually married and living with families. It's not an immunity. It's subjective entirely. And if you don't know that, you won't know that you're lonely, you won't take steps to fix it, and it'll impact your health, it'll impact your concentration, it'll impact your studies, it'll impact your joy, it'll impact everything. And yet this basic information that should be something every school child knows is not known. I said the American Psychological Association had a press release. No one read it, as usual. That's fine, I didn't write it, I don't care. But I'm just saying, this touches you. Here's another example, and this one I'll spend obviously more time on, and that is heartbreak. The interesting thing about heartbreak is that it can make people non-functional. People can just be in bed for 2 days, crying, not leaving, not bathing, not eating, not sleeping. It looks like the worst of clinical depressions. And yet, is it diagnosable? No. Can you get coverage from health insurance if you're heartbroken? No. I mean, therapists will give you another diagnosis just to make that work. But that's the point. That doesn't merit one. And both loneliness and heartbreak are not mental health disorders. They are common experiences of daily life. They will make you miserable and non-functional, and they will kill you, but they're not even considered a thing by the powers that be. This is the favoritism this is why I'm pissed off. This is the favoritism. Like, we do not take it seriously, and we need to, because we are impacted wickedly by things like rejection and failure and rumination and all kinds of ways in which we let our minds run amok and do what they do, not even realizing that we're getting injured, we're getting impacted. We need to take over and take control, but we don't, because we don't realize we're just us. We're just being. I'm just being. You can't just be. Anyway, and I'll show you why. Now, by the way, when I said that heartbreak is not considered a mental illness, some heartbreak researchers believe that love might be. And I'll explain why, and it'll make sense to you. By the way, they're a romantic bunch, apparently, those love research. I don't go to their parties because it just doesn't seem like it's going to be any fun whatsoever. But they literally, is a discourse. There was a debate about whether love should be classified as a mental health disorder in a way. And I'm going to explain why. But let me just say one thing. Why I'm fascinated with heartbreak is because there's no other human experience that can take somebody with zero psychiatric history and within a text message render them completely crazy. Nothing like that happens. Heartbreak is a form of grief, but when we lose a relative or a friend, we grieve. It doesn't make us crazy. We don't act out of sorts. We're depressed, we're horrified, we're upset, we're sad. Heartbreak makes you do crazy, crazy things. Can you just raise your hand if you've experienced or know people who've done crazy stuff when they're heartbroken? Yeah, a few people, and I'm sure that, like, wait a bit, it'll happen. The thing is that now the question is why? And I see this in my practice all the time. I've seen proud people grovel and beg. I've seen honest people lie and deceive when they're heartbroken. I've seen people fly out to Europe to surprise the person who told them that they don't want to see them ever again, because that seemed like a great idea. I've seen people who were extraordinarily wealthy offer millions of dollars, truly offer millions of dollars to the person who broke their heart just to be able to have a conversation with them. That's it. It makes us do crazy things. I don't know if you know the Jasmine Sullivan song. She busts the windows out the car because she's so angry, and so she'll do I don't know if that's an old reference at this point, whatever. My point is this: why are we so nuts when we're heartbroken? What explains it? It just doesn't happen with any other human experience. Nothing makes us act so outside our personality than heartbreak. And here's why. There are two major things going on in your brain when you're heartbroken that are highly unusual. In functional MRI studies, I'm going to assume you know what those are. They're brain scans in which you actually have people think or do certain things to see what happens in the brain. In functional MRI studies, when they looked at what happens with heartbroken people, by the way, you know how they did that study? Because it's often, when I read studies, I want to see the method, like how do they actually do that? Well, they solicited people who are heartbroken, said, come volunteer for this study. Actually, they paid them, thankfully. And what they did is they put them in an MRI tube, which is, by the way, a tube. It's right here on your face, stuck a picture of the person who broke their heart on the top of the tube, so it's right there, and had them relive the breakup to see what goes on in their brain. So, of course, the first thing I did when I saw that study is, how much were they paid? It's like, if that was a $5 thing, no. Anyway, what they found was that the same mechanisms were lighting up in the brain when you're heartbroken as light up when opioid addicts are withdrawing for substances like cocaine or heroin. The brain is not distinguishing between the withdrawal of romantic love and the withdrawal of opioids. Now, do you understand why those researchers are like, maybe love needs to be classified as an addiction. Maybe it is something that's diagnosable. Thankfully, it's not, but the point being. But that's what's going on in your brain. That's why people are acting in desperate ways. All the things I described earlier wouldn't surprise you if it were a heroin addict trying to get a fix. But it's not. It's an 18-year-old and an 80-year-old, and anyone in between trying to get the love back because they are going through a desperate moment. And that moment, by the way, can be days, weeks, months. Here's the other study that I wanted to reference. In another study, they wanted to see what emotional pain looks like in the brain in comparison to physical pain. So they did, again, they took the heartbroken people, but then for the physical pain, they took a heat inducer and put it on people's forearm. And it had settings from 0 to 10. And the question was, what setting can you tolerate for 7 seconds? And then they looked at, where does the brain sync up with heartbreak? It was on 8 out of 10. In other words, when people could no longer tolerate 7 seconds at setting 8, that's what it looked like in the brain. So almost unbearable pain in the brain, which goes on for way longer than 7 seconds. That is how dramatic heartbreak is. And as a society, it is a form of disenfranchised grief, because it's a form of grief. It has all the hallmarks of grief, but it's disenfranchised. We do not take it seriously. There is no adult that goes to work and goes to his boss and says, I need a couple of days off, my girlfriend broke up with me. Not a good career move. What you do have is a lot of people with quote unquote allergies taking toilet breaks because we're not admitting it. And it's a shame that we're not, because it should be legit. If you're heartbroken, you're going to be expected to come and sit through your exams or take the field or do what you need to do. There'll be no mercy. because it's not considered worthy of it. And yet it's paralyzing. It makes you non-functional. See the favoritism? See the bias? See why I'm pissed off? Anyway, I'm not that pissed off, but anyway, I'm just saying. So heartbreak is terrible. And what makes it worse is that the thing itself is terrible, but then your mind will take over and make it more terrible. Because our mind doesn't respond well to emotional pain. It thinks it's something it needs to warn us from. So your mind will do everything possible to make sure you don't make that mistake again. The mistake being in love and then getting heartbroken. So it's going to make it as painful as possible for you. So you're going to feel compelled to reach out, to go through every loving picture. And when people go through the pictures, they don't go through the bad pictures. They don't go through the pictures of the arguments or the scowling. They go through the love pictures when we were so happy, which just what? It just makes everything more painful. Your mind will come up with exquisite reasons of why you need to be in touch with your ex. No, but they forgot their favorite toothbrush at my place, and how are they going to manage without it? Let me go over there and give it back to them, because they must be missing it. You know, that kind of stuff, which happens all the time. You'll come up with, their cousin was getting married. Let me now go and stalk them on social media to see if they were at the wedding, just to see how they're doing. I'm just looking to see how they're doing. No, you're not. You're looking for a fix. You're withdrawing. You're looking for a fix. And today, I don't know, by the way, today on social media, you can find out anything about people. I don't know how private detectives are still in business in the age of social media, to be honest with you, because it's all out there. What's the detective for? I have pictures, so do I, they're online. So, thank you very much. I don't need it. Anyway, but I keep getting distracted. So anyway, the other thing that your mind will do is it'll turn you into a conspiracy theorist, because you need to know why. And all breakups practically are blindsides. Why? Because if somebody cares about you, unless it was a big fight or a big thing, or you just dated for a little bit, no one just decides, oh, maybe I want to break up. They don't then sit at breakfast and go, hey, I'm thinking of breaking up, past the cornflakes. That's not what happens. They plan it, often out of consideration. Oh, she has a big exam coming up. I'll wait until after. But then what happens is you have the exam, they break up with you the next day, and you go, oh my God, what happened? What happened during that exam that caused the breakup? Nothing. But you're just associating the time with the action, and you're assuming there's a correlation. There isn't. They were being considerate. I want to quickly go over how you need to recover from heartbreak. And, I have the TED Talk about it. I have a book about it. The podcast covers it. But I just want to go over that very quickly, practically in bullet points, because there are other things I need to get to. But I want to give you some points, because it's a similar principle from healing from other emotional wounds. So first of all, if it's heroin, no contact, cold turkey. As much as possible, no contact. No contact means stop texting 100 texts an hour. It's not a good idea. Delete the number from the phone. Unfriend, unfollow, temporarily if you must, but do not have access to them on social media. You'll use it. And what are you going to see with them on social media? Like you always see on social media, people look happy. How could they be happy when I haven't left my bed in 3 days? It's just going to hurt, right? So don't do that. Get rid of the pictures, archive them somewhere, give them, a passcode, and then go hide it somewhere so you can't retrieve it easily. No contact. Your goal in recovery from heartbreak is to minimize the stage time they get in your head, to think of them less and less and less and less. That's the goal. That's what recovery looks like. Rather than, I can't stop thinking about them. Oh, I had 2 hours where I didn't. Great, good step. So that's the goal. So no contact. Secondly, social support is really important. And that means from friends, and that means from loved ones. But be careful, because people typically feel with heartbreak that, okay, they have a subject, like if I'm your friend and you're heartbroken, I will have a subjective idea in my mind of when you should be over it. And if you're not over it, if you dated somebody for 2 months, and 2 months after the breakup, you still talking to me as a friend about, oh, but look at that text, what do you think they meant? I will lose empathy. And in an instant, there is a moment where compassion fatigue sets in, and you go from supportive to resentful. And so you have to be considerate of your friends. You can't make the friendship entirely about support group. It's got to be normalized in certain ways. But social support is important. The other thing that happens is in your mind's efforts to remind you to never do that again, do not fall in love again, and to make this as painful as possible, you will keep remembering idealized versions of the person. You'll forget all the times you wanted to break up. You'll forget how they were miserable. You'll forget how compromises you made. You'll forget everything. And you'll just, oh, that we had such a great weekend then. And oh, that night was so special. And at that party, there's real idealizing going on. Now, what you can do about that is you can't prevent the idealized thoughts from entering. You can balance them out. This is what I call the list. You need to make a list of 3 columns. Number 1, all the ways the person wasn't good for you. They weren't emotionally available, they were a little bit selfish, their personal hygiene wasn't terrific, they talked too much, whatever it was. And then all the ways the relationship didn't work for you. They didn't like my friends, they weren't interested in meeting my parents, they didn't want to do my things, they only wanted to do their things. And the 3rd column, all the compromises you made. The friends you stopped seeing, the activities you stopped doing, the interests you stopped pursuing. And then whenever your mind sends you these rosy, lovely memories of how amazing the relationship was, you take out your phone and you go through your list. If you have to do that 10 times an hour, do it 10 times an hour. But you have to balance out what your mind is throwing at you. And that's one way to do it. The next thing you need to do is you have to get closure about why. Why did the breakup happen? I'm going to tell you the answer to 99% of breakups, why they happen. The person didn't commit, they drifted emotionally, and they didn't tell you until they were out of love. They felt you were incompatible in certain ways. The timing wasn't right, they weren't emotionally available, etc. In other words, boring, uninteresting, undramatic, common reasons. What your mind is going to tell you is like, no, there's this one thing you did that if you could undo it, or this one habit you had that if you could promise that you'll change it, they'll be cool. No. That's not the case. But if you keep searching for the answer, you'll be stuck in purgatory. So it's really important to get to closure. And people say to me like, well, I just want them to tell me what it was. By the way, God forbid they tell you the truth about why, because it'll just be a list of all their pet peeves and what they didn't like about you. And that wasn't the reason anyway. Who wants to hear that? So it's very rarely dramatic. It's very, like if there was an affair and a blow up, you'll know it. If there was a knockout fight that they couldn't recover from, you'll know it. That won't be a mystery. It's a mystery when you don't know. And it's when you don't know that it's because it's just one of those natural things that happen. And it's no one's fault. You know what I mean? So you can just decide, let me just decide on a reason, that the reason was it didn't work out, we weren't compatible, they weren't emotionally available, whatever it is. But decide on it and stop asking, because the asking is preventing you from moving on. And that's the other thing you need to do. You need to be willing to let go. Because if you're not willing to let go, you'll be stuck in hope. And a lot of times people break up kind of wishy-washy, like, you know, maybe in 6 months. Oh, okay, I'll wait 6 months. No, don't wait 6 months. They're just saying that because they don't have the heart to say no. Don't wait 6 months. It's not going to happen. So let go of hope. Decide to start looking forward rather than looking back. That's really important. The next thing is when something fundamentally changes in your life, it leaves voids. Psychologically, we don't like voids. They need to be filled. So if you were living together, which I doubt you were at this age, but fine, let's say you were living together, half your apartment's gone. Or you would spend all weekends together. You would go to all the games together. You would go to classes together. You do all this. Who are you going to games now with? Who are you going to classes now with? What are you doing on weekends now? Right? So there are a lot of voids that need to be filled. That's an active process. Fill them, identify them, and fill them. Part of your friends went with them, not with you. Now there's more room on the bench for some more friends. Be active in finding them and pursuing them. You also have to redefine who you are. If you're with somebody for a stretch of time, you start to be a we, right? How was your weekend? Oh, we did this. We did that. Now suddenly it's I. It's truly a change of definition, because when we're with someone, we redefine ourselves as part of a couple. Now we're no longer. All of which is to say that recovery from heartbreak, as well as any other emotional wound, is an intentional, proactive process that you need to take control over. People always say to me, like, well, I'll feel better in time. No, yes, you might, but things can also get worse, because if you just let your mind go to those places, it's going to be a long time. And any emotional recovery, unlike a physical recovery is, by the way, like if your arm is broken, the bone is set, and then you're done. You're just in a cast, you're done. You don't have to do anything. You have to direct your body to, fix the cartilage and the soft tissue and all. It'll do it automatically. Not so with emotional wounds. That your mind, again, will try and keep you from avoiding the painful thing. It's not useful. You need to take control, and you need to do it. And by the way, I always say that the human mind might be the most brilliant machine in the universe. It requires adult supervision. And you are the adults as well as the machine. You need to have two hats. You need to disengage autopilot and take control of your emotional life writ large. You really have to be aware of what's going on. I'm in a stressful period. How am I managing the stressful period? Do I need emotional support at this time? People say to me like, oh, I'm going to finish college and I'm just going to move across the country and start a new job. And I'm like, oh, okay. So you need to set up a support network. You need to find a community. You need to do a lot of prep. You need to manage the loneliness. You need to no, it'll work out. No, it won't just work out. It's yours. It's your life. You need to take control over it and be intentional, right? And by the way, the last thing I want to just say about this is the age of social media. It's a real problem. This is why, did I tell you about loneliness? Who why the 18 to 24-year-olds the loneliest cohort? Because you're looking around at social media and everyone seems happy. And by the way, everyone's looking at your social media and you seem happy, except you're not. But you think they are. You think everyone has more friends than you and everyone is doing more social things than you, even though that's not true. And that makes you feel lonely. Lonely is a comparative thing. If you are stranded on an island with one person, you'd be like, I'm the luckiest person alive because there's only one and we're friends. But when you see everybody else seemingly have a life that you don't, you feel like, I'm not getting enough. And then you feel lonely. So social media is a real problem, right? There's a huge rise in anxiety and depression and stress, primarily because everyone else seems so happy because that's highly curated. That's what they're putting up on social media. Oh my God, she looks so amazing in that picture, in that selfie she took. Yeah, but she took 500 versions before she was happy with that one. So she's not so happy with herself. She looks like she loves herself. But if she loved herself, she wouldn't need 500 versions. She doesn't actually love herself, but that's what it looks like. I don't love myself, so I feel worse. Social media can be very, very toxic. And you need to get your arms around it, figure out, is it working for you? Is it not working for you? So the thing that I want to just end with here, we have just a couple more minutes, is part of the problem in getting social support, part of the problem in why is heartbreak not recognized? Why is loneliness not recognized? Is because there is this stigma, and the stigma is not about mental health. I mean, it is, that's one stigma, but the stigma is about emotional strength and resilience. We think that displaying emotional vulnerability or displaying emotional distress when emotionally distressing things happen will paint us as weak. And that is a fundamental misunderstanding of what emotional strength is. That misunderstanding is based almost primarily on the trope of the action movie hero, frankly. Just as an example, Liam Neeson in the movie Taken. For those who haven't seen it, he plays an ex-operative of sorts, and his teenage daughter is abducted by sex traffickers. Now, by the way, that wasn't a spoiler. The movie's called Taken. She's going to get taken, right? There were sequels. Apparently she gets taken quite a bit. Don't know why. Anyway, but my point is, so she's on the phone, with him. She gets grabbed live while he's on the phone with her by the sex traffickers. God knows what's going on. And then he takes the phone and he says to them completely with no emotion, oh, you messed with the wrong person because I have a particular set of skills. And that became a meme, right? I have a particular set of skills. He's threatening the bad guy, completely stoic. Now, by the way, being in touch with his feelings is not one of his particular sets of skills, I'm telling you right now. But the other thing is that is supposed to paint him as heroic. Why? Because it's the absence of emotion. That's not heroic. It's not human, it's not accurate, it's maybe in wartime. To me, if he had expressed that same sentiment with a tear running down his cheek, that would have been heroic. With his jaw trembling, that would have been strong. Because it's his daughter. He loves her. Of course, he's going to be really upset that the sex traffickers have just abducted her in another continent. But no, he's all calm. It's unrealistic. Emotional strength is never about your reaction in the moment. What determines your reaction in the moment is your arousal mechanism, your state of mind. There's some people who tear and shake in a confrontation, but they actually might be boxers. I've seen boxers who can shake and tear up in a fight. They're fighting. You know, like you sometimes see an athlete, cry, like I just saw the Tour of France once, and this guy fell, broke his back, apparently, he didn't even know. And he was crying as he kept cycling, and the commentators were like, oh, so sad to see him break down. No, he wasn't broken down. He was cycling to the finish with a broken back. When my car breaks down, it doesn't work. He was working very well. Tears are not a sign of breakdown. They're an arousal mechanism response. What matters is your comeback. Like I once spoke with two entrepreneurs, two women who had startups and didn't know each other, just coincidentally, and they both didn't get the funding for them. And one of them addressed her team stoically and the other one just burst into tears in front of her team. And if I asked you, well, who was stronger? You'd say, well, the stoic one. Except the stoic one never did another startup again. And the one who burst into tears had a horrible night, woke up the next morning and started another idea. Who's stronger emotionally? The one who cried, because it doesn't matter what you do in the moment. It doesn't matter if you can express emotional distress because you feel confident about yourself to go like, yeah, that's upsetting. So I'm crying a little bit or I'm tearful because that's terrible. That's strength, that's not weakness. And if more of us knew that, we'd be able to talk about these things more openly, and we wouldn't have that, inequity between our physical and our emotional health. So look, you need to become informed as people about emotional health, about the tools you can use to recover, to manage yourselves, right? You need to become as skilled at managing your physical health as your emotional health. You need to treat them like twins. Thank you very much.
It's Dave. I'm just sort of standing next to the camera. There's too much material and expertise to try and squeeze into 30 minutes. And I always sort of.
I know. I felt it was a squeeze.
And so we may need to have you back, if not this semester, then again. But a couple of the points that we don't have time to open up to questions, but a couple of points I wanted to bring up. You mentioned vulnerability and courage, and Brene Brown has done a lot of research around that, showing that what we're taught as young people, that vulnerability is weakness, that in fact, her research shows that vulnerability is the closest indicator to courage and leading an abundant, what she calls a full-hearted life. Now, it doesn't mean you share your vulnerability with strangers necessarily. It means you have to go to your trusted friends to share that. The second point, when you talked about making that list or that journal of the reasons why you broke up or that it ended, sometimes you can even share that with your best friends to make sure that they also stop you from calling and texting. But I'm wondering if you ever heard of like Esther Perel's 4 ways to end a relationship, or 4 things that you want to say. And I think it's like, maybe like, sorry, please forgive me. This is what I learned from you, and this is what I hope for you. Do you see that as a healthy way, or is that chasing someone that may not want to have that conversation?
First of all, just to mention, Esther Perel and I have been office mates for 25 years. So yes, I'm highly familiar with her formulation. I have a slightly different formulation of how you need to break up. I have a couple, maybe there's an article about it that I wrote once, but it depends on the length of the relationship. And what I think any couple, if they want to do justice to themselves, they should have a conversation. They should thank each other for what the time they have had together. They should do some thinking about what they've learned about themselves and about how they are in relationships that they want to take with them to the next relationship. And they should learn what they want to change for the next relationship. What are the ways in which they weren't the most, the best partners, and what they can do for that. It's a very difficult conversation to have in a breakup. So it's one of those idealized suggestions, but in practicality, it's not something most people feel they can do. It requires two people to be quite mature, quite well-regulated emotionally to be able to sit and have that conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah, maybe something down the line and not immediate. You know what I'd love to have a conversation with you on is grief, which we rarely talk about.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Another time, grief and loss and all those optimistic topics, but stuff that we're all going to experience. So thank you so much. I know you stayed up late in New York time. Let's please give a hand for Guy.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck. Bye-bye.